The galleries at the Plattsburgh State Art Museum here on the SUNY Plattsburgh campus have reopened, and for the next month are featuring a new exhibit by a photographer who followed in the footsteps of Adirondack painter Rockwell Kent, who famously toured the world looking for remote places. Dennis Defebaugh, a retired photography professor from the Rochester Institute of Technology, set out on his own voyage to Greenland after visiting SUNY Plattsburgh's Art Museum and Rockwell Kent Gallery and seeing the glass lantern slides from Kent's journey there in the 1930s.
I opened the box and pulled one out and put it up against the light, and it was like looking at a jewel, like a very, very precious item. And so that really got me excited, and I go, this is something I can work with. And I started thinking, okay, this is a way maybe I could go to Greenland.
And in fact, he did. After winning a National Science Foundation grant, Defebaugh and a team of anthropologists and a historian headed to Greenland in 2016. First to Nuuk, the capital, and then to many of the same tiny remote villages hundreds of miles north of the Arctic Circle where Rockwell Kent lived, painted, and took these photographs nearly a century ago.
Hardly anybody had ever seen these photographs before. Most people didn't even know Kent did photography.
So you went 85 years after Kent went. Yes. So the landscape was probably in many ways very similar, but obviously life has changed and the villages and the communities have changed.
It has. People are still, they make their living from the earth, basically. When Kent was there, they were hunting for whales and seals. That's how they made a living. But now it's fishing.
What fascinated you when you were there?
Really, almost everything. The landscape is just so overwhelming. It's so beautiful and so rugged and so remote. There are no roads in Greenland, and so there are no cars driving around Greenland. You're flying or you're in a boat. You can't get over the landscape. Every day it's there. And that's probably the most overpowering part of Greenland. But obviously the people are very interesting. They're different in terms of, what they want out of life.
And it's those people who make up much of Defebaugh's exhibition. North by Nuuk, Greenland after Rockwell Kent. On exhibit at the Berg Gallery at the SUNY Plattsburgh Art Museum now through March 11th.
I think it's an incredible body of work, and I think it's inspired by our Rockwell Kent collection.
Dennis Defebaugh, the photographer, was drawn to this project because he saw some of Rockwell Kent's lantern slides.
Right.
And he loved them, and that really is what was the impetus for this, for his trip and for this project.
Absolutely. In our permanent collection, we have many Rockwell Kent's artworks, but we also have a large collection of his lantern slides. And he used them as he would go around the country and present what he'd been doing on his expeditions. So the lantern slides were much like the first iteration of the projector, the slide projector. And he did hand color some of the slides himself. And it was really fascinating to see sort of the juxtaposition between some of the lantern slides from Rockwell Kent and the contemporary works that Dennis has included in this show.
Kent's lantern slides are on display at the Slatkin Gallery next door, along with some of Kent's paintings from Greenland on loan from collectors, like Kent scholar Scott Ferris, who now owns one of the maps that Kent used to navigate his way to Greenland, as well as a recording of an interview Kent did in the 50s, talking about his voyage to Greenland and some of his writings about his experiences there.
I have many different types of relationships for people in my local area.
Not only was Kent an amazing painter and artist, but he was an adventurer, which is why Ferris says it's no surprise that he ended up in such a faraway place like Greenland.
If you want to really get in tune with yourself as an artist, as Kent did, his first love was painting. And in order to paint what he felt, I think he needed to be in these locales, these extreme locales. And some of the works that came out of there are unbelievable. And Dennis is doing the same thing with his photography. So in that sense, he's also following Kent's footsteps. So you're not seeing exact locations, or obviously not the same people, but he's drawing on that same bloodline, if you will. The landscapes, the beauty of just the landscapes, the people, the message they convey in their expressions.
Defebaugh took along some of Kent's photos on his voyage to show to those now living in some of the same remote villages where Kent visited and lived.
But I had a notebook of photographs of Rockwell Kent's, and I would show that to people, and I would show slides also of his work. In Sissamute, we were in the Sissamute Museum showing the slides and talking about the project, and I showed a picture that Rockwell Kent took of him sitting in his house with Salamina and 2 other people. And I knew 3 of them, and I said, I don't know who this young woman is sitting here on the side. And a woman in the back raised her hand. She goes, I think that's my grandmother. They called her the round one. And she showed me all these photographs of her grandmother, and pretty sure it was the same person. Yeah, but we met so many people that way by engaging the community, engaging the people.
So why did you want to follow in Kent's footsteps and return to Greenland and go back to some of these same communities where he was?
Well, I think there was a documentation that he made already with his photographs. So that was the impetus to go back and try to see where he was and see if anyone remembers Kent and see what his place was in Greenland history.